Hi, everybody. Welcome to our final fellows reading of the conference. I'm pleased to welcome Lisa Donovan to the stage.
Hi. Everybody hear me okay? I was expecting a little bit more of a buffer than that, so hold on a second. Let me wet my whistle. This has been incredible. I've never been welcomed into such a warm space, so thank you guys for just creating like so much generosity and warmth and availability. And thank you to Leah and Adam and Gwen and all of the staff. And I'm going to read from my book, which I was just telling some folks, I think this is my first like human-to-human reading, like not virtual, because this book, I think I've only ever gotten to do a book reading on a really grotesque Zoom situation. So this is a really nice treat for me. So this is my memoir. It came out in 2020, which Matthew noted was a really notoriously bad year to come out with a book. And it's called Our Lady of Perpetual Hunger, and it was sort of put into a space of a chef memoir, but it is actually more about a woman who happens to be a chef. I think there were some folks that came to it hoping for a recipe for buttermilk pie, and they got an abortion story. So, surprise. I'm going to read from chapter 3, mostly because it was either between that and a lamb slaughtering scene, and I just felt like, it's the last day, let's give everyone a nice little glimpse into a fun restaurant I used to work in instead. What you need to know at this point is that I'm about 19 or 20. I'm in a devastatingly shitty town in Florida that my parents dragged me to when I was 17. There's a mention of a couple of names and a couple of situations that you'll probably just need a little backstory of. There's a man named Stuart Peterman that's mentioned. He is the father of the man I just broke up with. There's a previous scene where he puts on an album and sings the entire Wild World, what's that song? Cat Stevens' Wild World from Tea for the Tillerman. Like he lip syncs it to me as a way to say goodbye because I've just broken up with his son. And his son Philip is mentioned, who is at that point already my abuser, becomes my rapist, and also the biological father of my first son, my only son, my first child. I mentioned a window jumping out. So there's a couple of things. We've just come off of a reflection of a situation where he locked me in the house. I swear it gets lighter, I promise. He's locked me in a house. I've had to jump out of a window. He's busted my shin. So those are the things just to keep you abreast of some of the mysteries in the pages. Chapter 3, a pivot, wine. I always wish there were pictures because I feel like I'm reading to my children. I made 3 dozen biscuits the day I left Stuart Peterman's house and packed them into a metal vintage bread box because I was very cute back then. I took them to work where my second family, the one at the restaurant, waited with a giant rondo full of pasta and gravy on the stove, ready to eat, and 2 flats of strawberries, which I quickly trimmed and sliced and sugared with the help of One-Eyed Sam, my dear friend, who is the dishwasher every night except Sundays. Sorry, some friends got me really drunk last night, so I'm really thirsty today. You know who you are. We were like old ladies, me and Sam, gossiping together, talking shit together, giggling together, and dancing together every night to Etta James. He was someone I trusted, and he was someone with whom I made a lot of staff meal strawberry shortcake with during the summers. Tradewinds was an oasis for me. It was run by a man named Tom Euphemia. Tom single-handedly introduced me to restaurant culture and everything you might imagine that entailing. I was just a waitress in his trailer restaurant, yet he was fiercely protective of me and taught me everything I know about Italian wine. He knew about finer wines too, and we drank plenty of them. But he argued that there was not a damn thing wrong with a good, sturdy, not in any particular way special bottle of plain old table wine. And that, in fact, in order to really appreciate those nice, fancy things, you should make a habit of drinking the others with just as much reverence so as not to get too ahead of yourself in life. Tom was not a chef. He only liked good things. He had been a mechanical engineer his entire life, and this restaurant was his retirement gig. He was tall and salt and pepper bearded with a kind of pigeon-toed walk, always with old Sperry topsiders that looked like he'd worn them every day since the 70s, and glasses that sat perched on the tip of his big, beautiful arched nose. Tom was one of the few folks I opened up to about how my life really was back then. Little was said, a thing I appreciated, but much was understood. He had no patience for that Philip guy and would jokingly ask often if now was the time that he and the kitchen boys could take care of some things. This was my first kitchen family. Tom raised me, gave me my first bottle of Montepulciano to nurse, taught me how to walk across a busy floor and know what every single person in every single seat needed, even before they knew they wanted or needed it. Is John Toner, the BMW riding instructor, fishing around his moto gear looking for his cigar? Fetch an ashtray. Is 6-year-old Sammy fussing in his mom's arms because he's tired and his parents are trying to finish their bottle of Sangiovese to celebrate their anniversary? Maybe warm up some milk with sugar and cinnamon for him. Did someone move their food around their plate, not really eating it for the first 5 minutes of it being served? Maybe they want something else. Go on and ask them, Lise. His was the kind of hospitality that resulted in people forgetting their manners, people forgetting themselves because the feeling was so buoyant that you'd end up ugly laughing with gravy on your face and not even care. I learned what generosity meant and that it had nothing to do with material gifts, that it was a kind of spiritual calling for some of us, that unrequited giving of self. The food was good, don't get me wrong, but really people came to the restaurant because the whole place was an extension of Tom's good and boisterous heart. He was very affectionate toward me and I toward him. We always kissed hello, sometimes on the lips, but in the most familial, unpretentious, sloppy Italian way. He smoked cigars and made the finest Neapolitan-style pizza I've still ever had from a simple deck oven that he'd retrofitted the trailer with. Eventually, he upgraded to a wood-fired oven, and it's a miracle we never burned that double-wide down. At times, he would just sit there, sipping on a singular glass of wine that was never empty, because I took good care to replenish, sucking on a fat cigar, which were wetter than his kisses, legs crossed lady style with an elbow perched on his knee, the cigar dangling between 3 fingers, watching the dining room and the kitchen tick, and ready for a laugh or a fight at any given time. I learned to be quiet there. I learned that less talk meant more impact. I was young, and I'm certain I talked too much, and any time he heard me oversharing with a customer, he would tell me in a low whisper, "Listen, Lise, you gotta remember to keep your shit between you and your asshole, especially on my floor." And it's still some of the best advice I've ever been given. He was from Tarrytown, New York, Italian-mouthed and tender-hearted, and didn't hesitate to throw someone out of his restaurant by the scruff of their neck for not acting right. Luckily, we mostly had regular customers who knew the drill. You ordered good wine, you took your time, you were nice to your server, me, and you looked away when an argument broke out in the kitchen, no matter how heated it got. Tom had a temper about things he knew in his core were wrong. He lived by a certain code, one that I later realized became embedded in me too. You do right, you act right, you work hard, you play hard, you treat people with respect. He had no patience or tolerance for people with bad manners, and he really had no patience for cutting corners. He hired a motley crew of derelicts who were otherwise out of place in that town or in the world, and we all worked hard for him. We each had entire soap operas of our own happening outside of that trailer. A 27-year-old cook on parole after 5 years in prison, a classically trained but very young chef from Chicago who had come home to be with his parents because his little sister, just a freshman in college, was the victim of a fatal drunk driving accident. A once retired grandmother, now hostess, who had to adopt her addict daughter's kids and was starting over as a new parent at 65 years old with new bills to pay. A dishwasher with only one eye who never told you any of his real stories, but who seemed to have lived harder than anyone else in the place. And me, a girl made so ashamed of her ambition that she was letting some boy bust up her shins and break her spirit whenever he felt like it. Sam knew what my life was too, and he had the good grace not to ask about it. He had a rocks and a tumbler growl to his voice, one that made him sound like he was mad at you all the time. And I think he probably was mad at most people most of the time for good reasons. On that particular day, though, we spoke about my plans, my dreams, and the new apartment I had just put a deposit down on in Tallahassee. I was going to have a place of my own, me and Sonny. That's my cat, or was my cat. I was going to a real college with real challenges, and I was going to relish every single moment of getting there. I told Sam that my new apartment had a balcony, one that was high enough for me to see a pretty clock tower from, and he warned me, should I end up missing him too much, not to jump off of it. I promised him I would be careful, and that I would call in right often, as I accurately translated that as the only sufficient means he had to tell me he was sad to see me go. He was on a very short list of people I wondered if I could live without. We were 2 hours away from opening and about an hour away from family meal. I still needed to make whipped cream while the strawberries macerated. I got out the cream and tripped over the milk crate, making my wounded shin zing just a bit, jerking me out of my stupor, but also serving as a kind of victorious reminder of what my life was no longer going to be. I was in the kind of headspace that encouraged daydreaming and goofy grins that made everyone wonder. I spent the hours at work packing my things on Cotton Avenue and unpacking them in Tallahassee in my mind. What to take, what to leave behind, what to give away to friends, what to burn sacramentally in a colossal bonfire by the ocean to appease whatever gods or ancestors might be keeping track of whatever good fortunes I might have mistakenly taken for granted all those lost years. My days of lamenting my place or my decisions were over. A spark had been reignited right around when I tried to jump out of the window for the last time. I broke loose of some weird baggage I'd been carrying for other people, and I felt lighter and freer than I had in some time. I had vigor, the kind you could taste. I started whisking the whipped cream, 2 quarts by hand with a whisk the size of my arm, long strokes at first, then shorter strokes, then longer strokes, then shorter. I had strong arms and wrists, and the whisking took very little time back then. It was a small thing, but I made pretty whipped cream, the kind that is soft but firm, lactic but not too sweet, with just a bit of vanilla bean peppered throughout. I was in the zone, a little cream splattered on my glasses, absorbed in the motions when I felt Tom next to me where Sam had been just 10 minutes earlier. Hey, listen, your mom is on the office phone. She sounds upset. Do you want to take it? This is also way back when we had to go to a different room to take a phone call sometimes. And there's also an answering machine on here where you had to push a button and rewind and fast forward things. I'm very old. I appreciated Tom's forever understanding that no one had to deal in other people's shit unless they wanted to. I liked that he had given me a choice. Did I want to manage my mom right then and there? I had options, according to Tom. Options and choice felt like such a novelty for me, honestly, but suited me just fine in that moment. Do you want to take it? Made me feel like a grown-up. But of course I wanted to take it. It was my mother after all, and I didn't feel much like a grown-up anyway. As it turned out, it wasn't a phone call about her shit, it was a phone call about my shit. I said, yes, of course, hold the line for me, I'll be back in a minute. I wiped the cream from my hands, handed the whisk to Sam, knowing he was going to overbeat it without even meaning to, and cleaned my glasses with my shirt as I walked back to the office. The phone was an off-white wall-mounted rotary deal with a very long cord so that Tom could walk around the office and take inventory while he talked long distance with the wine distributors. I turned the corner and grabbed the receiver, which was teetering on top of the dial pad. My mom did sound distressed, but not at all in the way I had imagined or was accustomed to. I could tell somehow, even over the phone, that she was flushed, stammering, stammering over her greeting to me, not sure if she could be as emotive, whatever emotion she was feeling, as she wanted to be. My mother is seldom measured, yet here she was asking me to sit down. Mom, are you okay? Is Dad okay? What's going on? I don't have time to sit down. And then she giggled. She actually giggled. Mom, I'm at work. I was not amused, and at this point, Tom had sat back down at his desk about 10 feet from the phone. I know, she said really fast. I just don't know where to start. Well, start somewhere, I said, mostly for Tom's benefit. He cared very little that I was on the phone, but cared totally that I was in his space. Dr. Spellman called with your physical results, she literally shouted, more nervous than I'd ever heard her before. I had to get a physical for admission to Florida State University, blood work, vaccines, all the routine things. Here, let me play you the voicemail, because just hold on, she said, again, somewhat shouting. 2 or 3 of the longest minutes of my life unfolded then and there while my mother rewound the tape recorder and missed it by 2 messages, and then fast-forwarded, and then rewound it again. I held the phone up so I didn't have to hear the excruciating fumbling that was happening on the other end, rolled my eyes toward Tom, and leaned my forehead on the wall, twirling the phone cord between my fingers, a habit I'd had my whole life. Tom poured me a very full glass of wine and walked out of the office with a laugh. Okay, here it is. I'm putting you on the speakerphone. The tape started to play, and it was indeed Dr. Spellman. Hello, Lisa, just calling to let you know the results of your physical are tip-top. You're as healthy as they come, no surprises there. And also to say congratulations, looks like you're going to have a baby. Let's get you in for some prenatal care. Click. My mom pushed stop on the answering machine. That click lingered in the air like a goddamn Zeppelin had just exploded. You there? Lisa, you're still there. I was there, but I had slid down the wall, my back pressed up against it for stability, and was instantly splayed out on the floor with an overfull glass of wine between my legs and a 20-foot phone cord dangling from above like a noose. The lights seemed dimmer. My mouth was dry. I couldn't really find my way out of shock enough to make words. Lisa, hello, this is okay, we're okay, you're gonna be okay, my mom said softly. As softly as she could, but still with an air of excitement in her voice that I was not ready for. I was grateful for her voice on the other end of the phone, but my knee-jerk reaction was to hang up as quickly as possible. I remembered all the baby clothes she had been stockpiling in my closet for years, hoping this moment would come. I loved her, but I resented how much she was relishing this moment, especially on the heels of my impending departure, which was most certainly now in question. Mom, yeah, okay, I'm okay. We'll talk when I get off work. I'm okay. I stood up, hung up the phone, and felt my face and eyes burn with emotion, the way they can only when your body feels pure terror. Before I realized what was going on in the room around me, I felt Tom's hand on my back. I turned around and he always knew everything, which saved me from having to say more than I ever wanted to. I had no more defenses. I had no more resolve. I fell into his chest, went completely limp, and cried. I cried about 20 years' worth of hot, fierce tears, most of them accumulated over the last 4 or 5. I was so angry, and I was so scared. In an instant, I was back to square one. Tom held me up and did not say a single unnecessary word. You're okay. And then he kissed me on my wet cheek and said, you ready to get back to work? Because he knew that's what I needed. I handed him the glass of wine, went out front, and tied on my apron, not knowing then that tucking myself behind that soft fabric and tying those strings double wide around my waist would be the thing that would save me time and time again for the rest of my life. Service was starting. It was time to go. That's it. Please give a warm welcome to Olga L.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm going to read a bit from the second play in a trilogy of sociopolitical multidisciplinary plays. that are heavily based in folklore. And we're just gonna go through the beginning. This particular story is maybe almost 15 years old. It actually started out as a novella in college. And now it's a show, so I hope you enjoy. Act 1. Two aerialists descend from the ceiling, the male partner in white and yellow, and the female in black and purple, interact in a dramatic dance. Cosmic video art is projected onto the background. Afro-Native influenced music fills the soundscape.
The Indios used to say, the jaguar stalks the sun all day long and swallows it up at dusk, filling the night sky with its beautiful spotted coat. Each morning the sun is reborn from her inexhaustible womb. The darkness from which all things are born is the same darkness to which all things are born and return to when they are finished. Only Jaguar has the courage to lead the souls through the underworld so they may return anew like the golden sun. In the shadows, the Jaguar will wait until it is time to consume the world. When the Jaguar feeds for the last time, it will cause the end of days.
Aerialists land on the stage and dance samba. Carnival participants come from various corners of the theater, shouting and dancing. They interact with the audience, run on stage, and continue to dance. Carnival music is played by musicians. An old man, Elder Initan, the storyteller, sits on the edge of the stage.
I could tell you the story about the time that Aveni Vasconcelos put a spell on Danilo to make him fall in love with her.
Abeni steps out from the carnival crowd, leading Danilo by the chin with her pointer finger. As they dance, she playfully, then more seriously swats him away.
It took a week for Aveni to decide that she did not desire Danilo's love. After all, and when he found out, he stormed around like a wild bull for days, breaking everything in his path.
Danilo pulls on an extravagant carnival hood with horns.
He scared Aveni and the rest of us so bad we locked ourselves up in our house and refused to go to work or let the children play outside.
Danilo chases the other revelers who play along in mock fear, continuing to dance.
It was Chia de Zina who brought order by slapping sense back into Danilo with her cane. It was the same cane she used to whip Aveni until her ass was as blue as the river.
Chia de Zina emerges in an elaborate white and purple carnival dress and exaggerated sparkly cane and chases the duo back into the crowd.
I could tell you about the time that Samra El Habib accidentally made love to a wolf in the guise of a handsome white man from the city.
Samra El Habib emerges from the crowd with a man carrying a bombastic wolf prop over his head. They dance.
She gave birth to a furry infant with pointed ears and silver moon eyes, and the wolfman retreated to the forest carrying his tail between his legs, never to be seen again.
A child appears and chases Samra El Habib, who chases the wolf man back into the crowd.
Or maybe you want to hear about the day that Jose Delgado Leontes Aurelio Lopez Lopez had to defeat all of the capoeiristas in the village before he could marry Marcia, Danilo's sister, the Mestres' daughter.
Berimbau's feature in the music more heavily as the tempo of the music gains speed. Singers sing a capoeira song as the crowd moves into a semicircle open to the audience. Jose Leontes emerges holding hands with Marcia. He meets his first challenger, and a series of quick fight games ensues. Jose Leontes fighting challenger after male challenger. He eventually fights Danilo, the mestre, and his future wife, Marcia. Emphasis on the game with Marcia. When the game is over, he kisses his wife, and the crowd throws confetti, eventually morphing back into a generic carnival crowd. Music resumes as regular carnival music.
But that's not why you're here. You are here because she allowed you, because she called you. I'm talking about the Jaguar woman, and it is her story that I'm going to tell.
The crowd slowly stops dancing. Music comes to a halt.
For a complete story, I will have to tell you about the children who disappeared.
Rain and wind effects are launched. A crying child runs before the crowd, and a woman runs out to catch him and carries him away. The partiers duck the rain.
It You will have to know about the storm that was fiercer than the rains on Tia de Zina's death day.
Partiers scatter, rain wind effects become more intense.
You must know of stolen lands and stinging poverty, angry spirits, ancestral wrath, grave injustices to black skin, both blessed by nature and cursed by man.
Partiers wail or take cover.
You must understand why everyone here reveres the jaguar. But first, a cigar.
Elder Initan takes out a small box of cigars and holds it out to the audience as if offering. He shrugs when no one accepts his offer, takes out a cigar and clips, lights, and smokes it. Rain and wind effects cease. The partiers are relieved and reassemble on the scene. They compose themselves and shed their carnival costuming, transition into a normal village scene.
Your intellectuals will tell you that our stories are myths, that our spirits are symbols, archetypes. This doesn't change the fact that the Curipira will chase away hunters with his backwards feet, or that my jaguar can make a man throw himself willingly into the sea. Magic is real, stranger. It will kick your ass. I'm not a storyteller. I am a historian, a chronicler of events. You could have picked anyone in this village to tell you a story, but you chose me. That was a wise decision. I have a PhD in this shit. And others will try to deceive you. Understand, they are trying to protect the remnants of something sacred. But me, I got no secrets. I will tell you the truth. Chia de Zina has died.
Elder Chia, dressed in white, enters. Villagers who are also wearing white slowly walk to surround Elder Chia as she moves center. Other villagers turn to look but remain frozen. Occasionally there's a flash of lightning.
Chia was a matriarch, the spiritual godmother of this village. She had no children of her own, but her love for each of us rivaled that of our own mothers.
Children run to hug Elder Chia.
The day the lightning took Chia de Zina's life, she was busy, cutting her hands up in the sugarcane fields.
Elder Chia, facing the audience, slowly begins to fall back as villagers catch her and eventually slowly carry her off stage as if carrying a coffin.
We found her face down in the mud. Her overworked body was hard and cold like stone. As we lifted her from the earth, her feet, her ancient black hands, as rough as granite. But a smile was chiseled in the corners of her lips. She knew. The Dark Mother had finally reclaimed her. It is what she wanted. We buried her facing east to make it easier for her to go home. If you wanted to settle a quarrel with a neighbor, you went to Chia. If you wanted a warm meal, you went to Chia. If you wanted to be pregnant, you went to Chia. If you didn't want to be pregnant, you went to Chia. We're taking this week off in her honor. You came at a good time. There's lots of food.
Village women appear in the audience and offer fruit.
Chia de Zina is the one who called the Jaguar woman. Now ask me why in the hell she would do that. Well, I'll tell you. The story starts almost 40 years ago. Brancos from the city came to steal the land, my ancestors' land. Every day we pay homage to Mongo Izebe, the first leader of the Quilombo where the village stands today. To his lover, Desidera Gonçalves, the Portuguese daughter who helped the plan to escape from the fazenda with her father's horses and guns.
Girl one and boy one run around the stage giggling and holding hands.
To her mulata sisters who drugged the slave master and his son so they would awake in the morning to an empty plantation.
Villagers come out in a procession carrying candles, statuettes, and paintings of their ancestors and other spiritual figures. They walk from one corner of the stage to another.
To the natives of this land displaced and decimated by the conquistadores, who helped the slaves navigate and survive in the jungle.
More children come play, fighting each other with fake weapons.
To Ogun Zanwo, a general in the battle against the pursuing Portuguese who spared the life of the slave master and his sons. To Una, the indigenous priestess, who called the rain and fog to keep the Portuguese from pursuing again, who dreamt of this place as a spot to settle. And the Brancos? came to steal this land. Built their farms right over there.
Blackout, except on Nana's kitchen, where a younger Chia Adesina and elders Eduardo Chinelo, Mama Zay, Nana Zula, and Altavio Boceda are present.
Their cows and workers are going to keep dying. What did they think would happen when they disturbed the dead to build their farm?
Danilo has been hunting the Yaguara for weeks. What if it comes for our cattle, or us next, if the rain doesn't drown us first?
And what about the children? Zhao has been missing for days, and it's been raining since he disappeared. Luna's mother said she didn't come home last night. The rain is a sign. Those Broncos aren't the only ones being cursed.
Ancestors and Orishas need to be placated. This is a time for ritual and
This
prayer.
is the time to run those Broncos off our land. We should have never allowed them to settle in the first place.
And who will make them leave? You? With all the money and guns you don't have? Zhao is a young man. He's gone off on his own before.
Not like this. Something isn't right.
When Zay feels something isn't right, it isn't.
I wouldn't be surprised if those Broncos snatched them up and sold them off like they do everything else.
Luna is a beautiful young woman. Every girl her age has eyes for Zhao. I saw Zhao and Luna flirting not too long ago. I'm not surprised they're missing.
Tell that to the parents who are sick with worry. Ever since you remarried, your prideful logic has gagged the voice of spirit. Hey, how much money do you inherit when the old widow dies, Boceda?
You're ferocious as usual, Adesina. Should we all go crazy over what is probably the fervor of youth and the temptation of love? When Zhao breaks Luna's heart, they'll be back.
Everyone listen. This Quilombo has stood for centuries. It is not the first time that we have fought off attacks, and it won't be the last. But if we attacked our own, we are lost.
Blackout on Nana's kitchen.
Little Joao Barbosa and Luna Zuza. Their ages combined didn't add up to a full life. Police reports fell on deaf ears and idle hands, particularly when it came to two black Quilombola children. And the storm only got worse. Fierce winds beat down our rooftops. The rain hit us like bullets. Lightning shot down the trees. We closed our shops, abandoned our fields, prayed for mercy. Nothing helped. But on the 9th day of that storm, Chia Adesina had had enough.
Lights up on Chia's cabana. Chia Adesina is standing by an oven. As Elder Enitan speaks, she opens the oven, carefully takes out a pastry, wraps it in red cloth, and puts it in a basket. She begins to walk down center with the basket.
Chia Adesina lived alone in her cabana on the edge of the village. It was there that she appealed to Oya Ianza, the Orisha of storms and revolutions. She made magic dough and filled it with sweetened cacao, the pulp of the purple maracuja, and 3 drops of blood from her own unborn child. She molded the pastry into the shape of an infant and set it in her oven to bake. When it was finished, she wrapped the pastry in blood-red swaddling and placed it in a basket.
Facing the audience, Chia Adesina sets the basket down on the floor and kneels before it as if praying. She begins speaking in Yoruba. After a few seconds, Elder Enitan begins to speak, overlapping her words by translating into English.
Over it, she incanted in her Yoruba mother tongue.
Ipaoya Shijogwa, queen of the jungle, your passionate dance kicks up dust as you swirl. Cattle and trees are lost to the winds. The crack of your whip is the thunder, and you spit red fire, white lightning. The floods are tears from your laughter. But where is this rainbow that you are also control? You are the keeper of witches. You are the guide of the dead. You can take men's fortunes in the marketplace. Human affairs are of no consequence. But can you, Oya, in all your greatness, build a village with such puny human hands? Can you, with all your wisdom, comprehend the childless mother's grief? Could you, with all your passion, suffer the agony of the slave's welted spine? No, Yanza, you could never know such misery.
Chia Adesina rises, leaving the basket in place on the floor. Her eyes are closed as she begins to sway. She holds her head and backs away to center as if a woman possessed. She launches herself into a dance. Musicians sing Yanza dedications. The music and dance build in intensity until Chia drops. Blackout.
That night, Chiadazina left the basket by the gates of the village and returned home. By the next morning, the storm had passed, but the sun lay under a thick blanket of fog. When Chiadazina returned to the gate, she found an empty basket.
Full lights up on a chattering crowd.
I had gotten up early that morning to assess the damage from the storm. The crowd was gathering by the gate, preoccupied by something coming in the direction of the river. Out of curiosity, I joined them. And I saw it too.
Lights switch to black light. The Jaguar woman walks into the crowd wrapped in blood-red cloth, the same color as the pastry swaddling. The chattering crowd goes quiet as the crowd forms a semicircle around her. Jaguar woman faces the audience. Her eyes glow green.
Who are you? Why do you come to our village?
Mother, I have come because you called me. Poison is seeded within the ground here. If poison is allowed to grow, your children will reap death.
What do you know about the children?
The smell of blood is already on the wind.
Enough riddles.
Who are you? How do we know you speak the truth?
I have many names. Some call me La Tigra. Within 9 new moons, you will see how my words are true.
Jaguar woman falls at the priestess's feet. Blackout. Thank you. And next up, we have Brenda Peynado.
Hello, everyone. I am very sad to be the last fellow reader of the conference, but I'm just really, really thankful to have been here with all of you. And of course, thank you to Leah and Adam and Gwen and every single one of you wonderful staff members that have made this such a special place. And also to the actors. I went yesterday to one of those How to Read Better sessions for hosted by the actors. So I'm gonna try to perform this a little bit more than just a monotone, but if I do anything weird, blame Jesus. Where are you? Blame that guy. I am going to read the opening of the first story in my collection from the Rock Eaters called Thoughts and Prayers. A small content warning is it's about a school shooting, but I'm going to skip over any parts that are graphic, so it's just sort of the beginning and the aftermath. I'm going to read the opening and then just one scene. The morning before the school shooting passed like any other, all my neighbors out at dawn performing oblations to the angels on our roofs, families clustered around the sidewalks, mist from our lawns swirling around our ankles, us looking up at the pale humanoid faces and downy bird bodies perched beside our chimneys. Our mothers beat their breasts, performing sorrow for the tragedies that always went on elsewhere in the world. Our parents yelled their usual thoughts and prayers toward the angels atop our roofs. As children, we were supposed to kneel in the moist grass and be quiet in case the angels were ever to speak. The angels, for the most part, barely noticed. They chewed their cud from the grasses and bugs they scavenged during the night and then shat runny white on our roofs, the shingles looking iced with snow despite the Florida heat. When I was in kindergarten, we'd thrown rocks at them to get their attention, but they just turned and resumed their silent watch over the neighborhood. My parents began the ritual, already dressed in their work clothes, looking as polished as a photograph in front of our freshly painted stucco house. I was obedient in my stiff school clothes. My mother never allowed me to stumble outside in my pajamas like some of the other kids. Out of all the angels, ours was considered the most blessed of the neighborhood. When my parents came to this country after college, this house was the first one they looked at, and their immigration papers arrived miraculously within the week. While others searched for homes and jobs for months, my parents sailed into their new life, prayed gratefully to their new rooftop patron. When the economic downturn came and brought with it a plague of layoffs, my mother was able to keep her tech job, and my father flourished in a financial field that boomed in downturns. Betting on failure, he called it. The hurricane tore apart most roofs in our Florida suburb, but not mine. Every day, my mother returned to the house, pulling into our drive. She breathed a great sigh as she saw our angel perched beside our chimney. Dumb eyes that looked at nothing, sleek-winged, albino-faced. At our basketball games, the parents cheered for us, but it was known that the real game was played silently among the angels. Across the street, my best friend Rima Patil's family kneeled in front of their ramshackle house, the embarrassment of the neighborhood. Mold blooming on the stucco, brown waves along the roof lines where the gutters and wooden fascia had fallen into disrepair, a bright blue tarp over the roof above Rima's room, where a hurricane had downed a tree, just barely missing their angel. The blue tarp rolled and snapped like a flag of shame. Rima's family was known to have the worst angel on the block. Her dad was one of the first to get laid off, lose health insurance. The bank had visited their house 3 times in the last month. And when the hurricane hit, the oak tree in front of their yard not only punched a hole in the roof, but also fell onto the family car. The tarp they placed over it leaked mist and bugs and occasional angel guano. That they were the one Hindu family in a neighborhood of Latino Catholics was not lost on my mother, though the fact that they were even darker than the rest of us, my mother pretended not to notice. Rima was wild, a force of nature, and my mother was known to count this as one of Rima's mother's misfortunes. Nothing terrible had happened to Rima's sister, Shruti, yet. She was a valedictorian, a national prize cellist, radiated beauty, but we were all waiting. There was a sense that she would not be spared. I idolized Shruti for her ability to walk the line between strength and obedience, her ability to get away with doing what she wanted while still looking like a saint. Unlike Rima, who fooled no one, and me, feeling caged and wanting desperately to do something unforgivable. Rima winked at me and then resumed solemnity, leaning on her fists in their overgrown grass, her family around her. Sunrise bled hot over the roofs like a punctured yoke, another day given to us. The angels above us looked into the distance, snapping their mouths to eat mosquitoes from the air. How could I have known that this would be the last time I would see all of them together, that unlucky family? And if I had known, what would I have done to protect them? We had every reason to believe the day was bright ahead of us and we would survive it. Okay, I'm going to skip forward. And as you can probably guess, Shruti was not spared. There was a school shooting. And the day after, as part of the aftermath, an Instagram prayer group comes to town. This story is very weird. I'm sorry. An Instagram prayer group comes to town full of these moms who pray to the angels with their children, who they call the innocents, who were spared. They were kids who were in the midst of a school shooting, but were not one of the ones who died. And they call them innocents, and they stage these big marches at the forefront of every school shooting. They're very like pro-gun rights, and they sort of follow all of the shootings that happen across the country. So I'm gonna skip forward, and the only extra thing that you need to know is that the narrator has had a fight with Rima, because her family has decided that in the wake of this tragedy and their grief, they're going to move and try to escape the town and this angel, and Paola demands that Shruti stay, and that Rima stays, and Rima is pissed about it. Upstairs, dozens of kids plugged up my hallway and my room, homeschooling books discarded around them. A group of kids my age sat on my bed with a lit pillar candle on a used paper plate, and they were holding hands and singing. "What are you doing here?" I wanted to bury my face in my pillow. "Practicing," said a chubby boy wearing a good guy in training shirt with a sponsor list on the back, stopping the song. "We're right underneath the angel," another said. I nodded. Rima and I had often jumped on my bed with a broom, pounding the ceiling every time we reached zenith, daring the angel to respond. Then the door opened with a bang, and Rima stormed into my bedroom. Her red eyes were rage. "I'm sorry," I said in a rush. She'd wanted me to let her go, and I swore I could. She scoffed at me, at the innocence overrunning my house and sitting on the bedspread my mother had picked out for me, where just days before we'd prank called grocery stores, Rima dialing the number, holding the earpiece. The other line had picked up with "hello," and for a moment we'd been held in trembling anticipation at what we might do or say, what we might become. "So, you're the one we're here for," the chubby boy said to Rima. All the children stopped talking to appraise her. Between them, they'd seen so many school shootings, so many survivals, arrived at so many houses of tragedies, and slept in the beds of the absent. What was there to say? "We're sorry about your sister," a girl said finally. Rima nodded, closing her eyes, setting her jaw against crying, and when she opened them again, she was the Rima whose strength I always trailed after. A girl took a quick selfie with Rima in the background, uploading it to Instagram with the tags, "new March location, stay tuned, hashtag the innocents, hashtag survivors, hashtag on to the next, blessings, thoughts and prayers." "We're here to bless you," the chubby white boy said. "Like hell you are," Rima said. The boy shrugged, undisturbed. He'd seen this before. "Want to play good guys and bad guys with us? You can be the good guy this time." Rima glared at me, stood across the room, but they didn't give her a chance to refuse. They moved like a rehearsed theater group, so used to this, so quick and polished. They passed out toy guns that felt real, even the metal heft of them, even the tiny speaker that made a discharge when you pulled the trigger. Rima started, a good guy on the one end of the upstairs hallway, and the boys started as a bad guy on the other. The rest of us were innocents, hiding, kids caught in the crossfire. When we heard the first gunshot from the bad guy's toy gun, the rest of us scattered. I ran towards my closet, huddled over the shoes, helpless, as I was supposed to be. This was how they had survived. I could hear footsteps running across the carpet in all directions, gunshots, kids yelling good and bad so that others could tell the difference. The game wouldn't end until everyone had been unearthed from their hiding places, declared for one side or the other. I hoped that Rima would come after me. Then someone threw the door open to the closet, and there was Rima, the daylight behind her too much to look at, pulling me out. She shot me in the heart with a gun. The hard barrel pressed against my chest, her eyes wide. I flinched, frightened. It sounded so real. "Good," she shouted, and then she softened, slipped her fingers into my hand. She'd forgiven me. I wanted the game over. What did it matter? Which other kids fell around me, which didn't? We were surrounded by shrieks, gunshots, laughter. "I don't want to play," I said. "Then we won't play," she said. The dormer window to my bedroom was open. Rima pulled me to it, climbed onto the roof. I followed, hesitant. We shuffled toward the angel that perched beside the chimney, trying to keep our balance on top of the fresh angel guano. The angel watched us, calmly chewing whatever was in its mouth, despite the shrieks underneath us from those who'd been caught. There it was, the most blessed angel in the neighborhood, and I, the child my mother was constantly trying to whip into shape to deserve it. A bird smell, sour and musty as a pigeon roost, made me dizzy. Below us was 20 feet down. Over the edge of the roof, the yellow moving truck waited in Rima's driveway to take her away. In the yard, a group of good guys led my mother and some of our neighbors through a target practice against bulletproof Kevlar they'd stretched against my back fence. My heart thrashed against me. My tongue plunked, heavy as lead as I swallowed. Our sneakers slid on the roof. "Stop," I called, just as I slipped forward on all fours and my palms landed in the fresh white ooze. "Since when are you scared?" she said, her hands on her hips at the top of the roof. I would have given anything to discard my fear then, to chuck it down where it would burst on the sidewalk like a rotten fruit. Instead, I found my mother's voice bubbling out of me. "Maybe don't antagonize them," I said, nodding at the angel. "You think it's the angels that did this? You think we deserve this?" She was echoing her parents too. How could you say that? I said. Well, nobody's doing anything. I pointed to the people target practicing underneath us. They're doing something. I've never heard you defend your mother. Rima pulled out the toy gun that had dangled out of her pocket. She was right in front of the angel, which ignored her to peck at its wingtips. She pointed the gun at me. Are you good? She asked. Don't, I said, trying to keep my balance with my hands up. She closed one eye, put the other against the barrel, aiming. Her right foot was sliding down the roof. Yes, I'm good, I shouted, and it felt like a defeat. Then Rima slipped, the gun falling out of her hands and clattering down the roof. She collapsed backward against my angel. It folded its wings over her. I blinked, and it was suddenly like she wasn't even there. Disappeared behind white down, only her basketball sneakers poking out from the bottom of the wings and folding her. I couldn't breathe. The thought of touching the angel after such disrespect, sending my heart plummeting like a cut elevator, I wanted to go after her. But there was my mother's voice again, telling me to follow the rules, to wait for the impossible moment when the angels would speak. Rima disappeared. This was what the rest of my life would be. No one to tempt me, push me, no one to release what was caged inside. Did I feel relief? Instead, I felt like I had lost my own sister. I resolved to be better, to be good, once Rima was gone, but only then. I dove after her. I forced the angel's wings apart and wrapped my own arms around her, the wings closing back over us. Tiny feathers whirled around us in the sour air. The giant bird at our backs breathed softly and its muscles twitched. Rima's dark braid draped over my arm, studded with down. The gravel of shingles encrusted angel shit underneath us. The shots below from target practice in the game were distantly muffled. I thought about what it might be like to have wings, where we would go. Certainly not to perch on the roofs of unhappy families. No protection but the rushing air. We would let loose an endless screech over the swamps, release our lament and our triumph. Our fragile, hollow bird bones, a strength that pushed us higher. Rima was gasping, shuddering breaths. She leaned into me. I remembered a night we'd streak naked across the street while our parents were sleeping, her brother laughing with us as he saw what we were doing, chucking socks out his window into the grass, and Shruti leaning out her own window, still humming, straining against the windowsill like she wanted to join us, but she'd left such childish freedoms behind. The grass was cold under her feet, the humid wind startling on our exposed skin. Yet us, sitting on top of this roof, the commotion of the innocents underneath us, the angel exhaling hot breath at our backs, felt more like nakedness. Had the neighborhood looked up, they would have seen two flightless girls on the roof, wings over them, coming to grips with what was being taken from them and taken from them. Then the wings parted, and there were the rest of the children, already climbing up the roof from my window. There was the sky, all those roofs gabled with white birds. If only we could keep this vision, every roof identical, every roof as blessed as the next, every human sheltered beneath them promised to survive the daylight. In all of us, as we rested against the angel, the other kids whispered among themselves about relics. They started taking off various things they were wearing, friendship bracelets, headbands, watches, socks, and touching them to the angel's ruffling feathers, soaking up whatever blessedness resided in angels. They were making new holy relics for their moms to wear or for selling on Etsy to those who wanted protection. When Rima's father had first lost his job, I'd had the idea then to switch our angels, to give her family a bit of good luck. I hadn't been brave enough or strong enough then to capture the angel twice my size, to try to drag it off the roof. But that had been years ago. Now, I started pushing the angel in the direction of the roof, sloped towards Rima's house. Help me, I said to the other kids. 30 of us pushed the angel's body, dug our hands in its feathers, its heat, its quivering muscles. All of us, good guys and bad guys, trying to change what was about to happen to us. But this was a lark, a game. We were only pretending, like every morning, on our knees. No matter how we rocked and pushed and pulled, the angel stayed. Thank you.